Nick here from Trainer Plus. This is the second video in our series on how to innovate your fitness business online, especially with all the challenges everyone's facing here in the pandemic and with all the changes going on in the industry. So in the first video, we talked a lot about the economics of what's happening right now, how revenues in membership and personal training are down, and the old business model that's based off of those, off of selling sessions and selling memberships, really isn't working anymore. There's a gap in that revenue, and that video is a little bit more focused on the why this is happening, whereas this video is going to start to focus a little bit more on how to fix that, how to make it up, how to adapt your business model so that you can shift your focus and start to drive new revenues and embrace online stuff that really works. So today we're going to explore different options that we're seeing, that we've seen people try, and I'm sure you've tried yourself. Going from putting out online content like video form content, streaming classes, doing virtual training. And we're also going to talk about programming, which is a service not a lot of people are doing, but is something to introduce that makes part of the mix-up for what all you can do. The idea is that we can give you a sort of a mix of services, a range of things you can do, and how those all work together to actually drive new revenues and make up that revenue gap. Because what we've seen really is people taking the existing stuff they've done, so classes and PT, and just kind of shifting it online and hoping that that would, make up enough. And while it's been kind of good for the existing audience and it's retained some members but not all, it really hasn't been a way of driving a lot of new revenues from what we've heard from talking to people. So you really need to adjust and adapt the business and look at new services that can complement those as well, in terms of how you're going to be actually able to make new revenues from your existing audience, not just your members but also the audience that you have online, and also potentially reach out to new markets and drive new potential customers to you, not necessarily into your gym but at least to your services themselves. So that's the challenge, is how you're going to reach new customers. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today and a little bit more in other videos. So especially these days, it's gotten extremely competitive online, with everybody moving out there, and we're going to explore all the market realities for these different services and what's happened. So the goal here is to give you tools to grow, but I want to be really realistic about just how you can do that. A few realities about the market and customers in general going on right now. There's more fitness content than ever out there, and increasing all the time. And there's more people also working out at home, but those people, if they aren't existing members already, they don't necessarily have brand loyalty. Most people now have adjusted and they're good with video calls or technology, using apps. People are a lot more adapted to doing things online, so that's also just the reality of sort of customer expectations, and that's working in the advantage. But with that, both customers have moved online, but also so has all of your competition. The other reality is that geography is really no longer a restraint, like it is if you're looking at just selling membership or just selling training. But at the same time, your local market is still the best one. So the opportunity to reach out to your existing market with new services is one thing we're going to explore, and also how you can find new markets of potential customers. Before we jump in and start talking about the different services, we're just going to introduce a framework and a couple of tools that we're going to use in order to explain what's happening in these given markets. So we're going to use the supply and demand graph, as well as a customer conversion funnel, in order to visualize what's happening when we talk about the different services and their markets. So the supply and demand graph, this is the basics of Economics 101. It talks about what's happening in a given market for a product or services. So the supply being what all of the firms who are the sellers of the service are doing in the market, and the demand being what the customers are doing in that market in terms of consuming it. So on the bottom axis, you have the quantity, or the amount of a given product or service, and on the vertical side of the graph, you've got the price of a given product or service. So we're the supply curve or line that we're using here that goes up and to the right, and that's again what firms are putting out in terms of that product or service in the market. And obviously at a higher price point, they're going to want to put more out in the market, and at a lower price point, less. The demand curve or line, which is the green line, which goes down as we move to the right, And that's because as the price goes down for a service, then people are going to want more of it, and as the price is higher, they're going to want less of it. So where those two lines meet is where we get to equilibrium in a market. And you can draw down from that meeting point, and that's where you should get the quantity that's being provided in the market. And if you go over on the vertical side, you see the equilibrium price of what's being provided in the market there. So the one thing that can happen to these markets, as we see, is changes can happen to supply and demand to increase demand or supply, and it's going to shift these lines to the right or the left, and we're going to come to a new equilibrium in those markets. And that's what we're going to talk about, the basics of what's happening in these markets, sort of where they were pre-pandemic, just without getting into too many specifics, and what's happened to those lines with the pandemic and how it's affected those given services in the market for those services. So the other tool we're going to use is the customer conversion funnel. And this just basically shows how customers start at the top of the funnel, and move down through different layers until they get to a purchase. So at the very top, you've got people who are aware of a given product or service, and then at the next layer, a number of those will convert to being interested in that product or service, moving down how many desire that product or service, and then lastly, on that top part of the funnel, how many will purchase that product or service. After that, from purchase, you have how many people will adopt it, and going from there, how many people will stay and retain in the long term, and then how many people will expand beyond that to continue to buy more or add more value or more revenue from them if you're looking at it from the firm perspective. So at each stage of the customer conversion funnel, a certain percentage is going to convert through as you go. And go through, and that depends on the market and the service and the customer base, all in terms of what conversion happens. At the top of that funnel is the total potential market for that given product or service, and as you move down, at the bottom of it from the purchase down is the potential revenue that can be made. So those are the basics of the funnel and how they apply to the services that we're going to talk about, the online services and fitness we talk about as we go through the different things. Okay, so the first service we're going to look at is online content. And when we're talking about this, we're talking about putting content out about exercise, workouts, nutrition, motivation, sort of general long-form videos that people are doing. And in some cases, people are charging for this content, whether it's videos or blog posts, stuff like that, articles, where people are consuming and charging a subscription for it. The challenge is that there is a lot of content out there, both on the free and the paid side of things. And it's making it very, very difficult to monetize. If you look at the competition, there's tons of free stuff out there on Facebook, on YouTube, Instagram, and on the paid side of things, you have a lot of aggregating websites that have subscriptions and tons of good content coming from experts at a pretty relatively low subscription rate each month. So looking at the market, with the pandemic, we've seen a pretty significant increase in the supply of how much content is out there. So that supply line has moved to the right, whereas not as huge an increase or a substantial increase in the demand, as much as it's pretty much the same audience that's consuming that health and wellness and fitness type of content. In some cases, some people maybe some more people that are getting more conscious of it with the pandemic, but also there's other people that have kind of let that go as they worry about other things. So in general, the demand is about the same. So the result is that we've seen a real big increase in the quantity of content that's out there, which in theory is decreasing the price for high quality content. So looking at it from the customer conversion standpoint, looking at that funnel, your reach for this is basically your existing audience. So everybody you have that's in your social channels and in email lists, so your members and people that you have, through social. That's the top of your funnel that are aware of your content. Looking down, you go, okay, how many of those people either read or watch your content would be the people that might be interested in it. Going back down another layer that might desire it, that might desire to pay for it, is how many of those people, read or watch it regularly, and they share it, they have that engagement with it. And from there, the next layer is how many of those people would actually purchase a subscription to continue to get content from you. So you again get a rough idea of this from looking at the current percentages of your following, and in terms of the numbers that in your reach that actually view and engage your content. But in general, this funnel, it gets narrow pretty quickly because as many people want to maybe consume it, to get people to actually pay for it, that's quite a lot lower number in it. So what does that mean? The conclusion of that, you'd have to have a pretty large initial audience and really high quality content for people to want to go all the way through and pay for this, which means it's really tough to scale and create significant revenue here on your own as a standalone service. It's definitely a necessary activity. You want to keep members and clients engaged, so it's an activity to help retention and even in some ways help lead generation. In general, this is probably something you want to do as a free part of your offering in the service mix, especially just for your existing customers. And unless you have a built-in audience that's already paying for this now, or a significantly large audience that might be able to convert to this, you probably need to do this as something that's free. It's definitely a key activity you need to do, and it has a lot of value add to your existing customer base. And you can even attract new potential customers for other paid services from this content by then using it, looking at it, and you build up brand equity with it. Next up, we're going to look at streamed classes. So when we're talking about this, it's your Group X class, those classes that you're trying to put out through video online, whether it's using free tools like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Zoom, things like that, Zoom is a paid tool as well if you're doing it right, or there's tools designed specifically for streaming classes, managing subscriptions, and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of gyms are doing this as a part of their membership, or they might be charging for it instead of membership, or looking at it as a paid add-on to membership. It's a lot of what we've seen. The opportunity here is that you can control access to it. There can be a potential revenue stream here for it. It's a complement to other services. And really right now, it's an alternative if the gym is closed or members don't want to or feel comfortable to come in the gym in person, then keeping them engaged with some class content is a way of keeping them paying the membership, keeping them moving until maybe they feel comfortable to return. The challenge in this is for gyms to scale and monetize this. And we've heard this a lot from different gym owners that have put a lot of stream content out there. So, can you generate new customers from it? That's a real challenge. Are your customers willing to pay full value for this, like the value of a membership? That's a challenge. So it is very hard to scale and monetize it. And we'll get into some of the reasons here in a minute. The other challenge is if the customer themselves don't really have their own working knowledge on how to do things right, or have the right habits themselves in terms of getting there and doing it regularly, they might not necessarily see the value and see results from it and want to keep coming back or see the value in paying for it or continue to pay for it if that's what you're trying to do. So there's a couple of challenges to just stream classes in general, and they're similar to what you have when you're running just classes in your gym as part of the membership. Now this is slightly different for trainers because you can reach for individual trainers, you can reach a broader audience. You don't need quite as many paying people to make it a little bit more feasible, a little bit more scalable. It also works as direct lead generation for other services and can be used really effectively as a part of challenges, which we'll again talk about later on in other videos. So in terms of the competition, this is why it gets hard to scale. This is an incredibly crowded market. Everybody is now doing this. Everybody's putting stream content out there in different channels, and it's very, very hard to stand out for that. If you look on the paid side of things, you've got some really big players in this space, like Peloton with their monthly kind of boot camp streaming service. Apple's now coming into this market as well at a pretty reasonable price point. Most of the big chains, especially the big boot camp chains, they have some form of stream content and everything on it as well. If you look on the free side, again, everybody's putting stuff out on social media, through their websites, through YouTube, things like that. So there's just tons of content out there. So looking at the market, we can see how this has really affected it. As much as the demand has increased, because there are people working out at home, there's definitely more of an appetite for people streaming classes, so that demand has increased and that line is shifted a little bit to the right. The supply has increased dramatically. So all in all, what that means is there's a much, much larger quantity of this in the market, which also is going to drive the price down for it when you look at the balance between free stuff and paid stuff. This is especially going to happen as Apple comes into the market here this month in November with their Fitness Plus offering, which is going to put an even bigger supply of content in the market at a pretty low price point. Looking at the conversion funnel for it in terms of what you have to do to get to drive customers to it. Again, your reach is that whole social reach in your email chain, your members and the people that you have on social media is who are aware of your potential classes that you're running. Then you look at how many people would want to attend a class as being the next level that could be interested in this as a paid service. And then next up with those that would actually attend regularly, so they have a desire for that. And then how many of those people are willing to pay for that regular stream content. That's your conversion funnel. It may be hard to convert people to pay for this outright, just given the competition that you're facing. And again, especially if they're new customers and even if they're existing members. And on the new side, especially if they're not familiar with your brand. So if they haven't done your class before and followed along, they might not know it, they might not see the value in it, and it might be hard to attract and convert them into paid, and especially retaining them on paid when there's all these other options out there. So the conclusion about this, again, we think it's really difficult to grow a substantial new revenue with this on its own. And again, especially attracting new customers where you're competing in this huge sea of people. And this has been backed up by many gym owners that I've talked to that have gone into this and started streaming content. And it's kind of kept enough of their members, retained some of them, maybe saved a few of those freezes and cancellations, but they're not seeing this grow into a bunch of new customers necessarily. Your price has to be really competitive with the better known brands in order to do this. And you have to have a lot of people at the top of your funnel in order to convert them to purchasing. So that funnel is pretty steep as you go and it gets narrow at the bottom. And if you look at brands like the big chains, which have tens of thousands of people on their social feeds or they're following their potential market for it, Peloton, which has hundreds of thousands of people it reaches, if not millions, and Apple, which has millions of people as their potential market that they can convert to paid. They also put out really high quality content shot from one location from experts, and they're looking at converting a percentage of this. So that's what really you're competing against in that market. Again, this is one of those things that it's a key activity to have for retaining your members and your clients, especially those that are price sensitive and those that are going to work out from home. So it is something you have to have in the mix if you're a gym, and especially if you were a gym that already did classes. It's good to invest time in the tools for this, so you're familiar with how you're streaming this stuff, your lighting, your sound, everything, so that the production quality is high, as well as how you're controlling access. And that's just if you want to deliver enough value to retain those people, but especially if you're thinking about charging for this service. All in all, we think this is a really good activity for retention of your members right now, and another key activity you need to be doing. And it can work as lead generation for other paid services, especially if people are doing your classes and they're not getting the results they need. Then you can talk to them about some more support from a trainer and other services that you might be offering, especially online services. Again, just like we talked about with the trainers, this is a key element that you could run in challenges and as a complement with classes and those other things when you look at training and programming all in all together. Those were the markets for online content and stream classes. So the services that are a little bit more self-directed, self-guided on the customer side for clients and members, and a little bit more passive on the service delivery side for gyms and trainers. Both of those obviously face similar challenges, as we said. They're very hard to scale and to monetize given the competition out there and how much of that stuff is out there, given the size of the audience you need to have to convert them into paid, and the amount of value you'd be able to deliver. So in the next video, what we're going to look at is the training side of things. So virtual training, like one-on-one sessions done through video, as well as programming and oversight as a service, and see how those markets look in the same framework we just used to analyze these two. And after that, we're going to look at how it all works together to provide a range of services which will allow you to reach out to new customers, new markets, and drive new revenue. And then also how to put it all together and figure out what works for you, how to take an innovative approach at finding the right service mix and the right prices. So join us next time when we look at the training side of things and online training and the potential there as we keep going through the series.